It's all about humanity. About humanity. It's all about humanity.
So I was a fan of Bob Hall's from way back. In fact, I was introduced to heavy metal and all that kind of stuff before I was ever into comic books. And like the story I tell everybody is I wasn't allowed to have comics or anything like that when I was a kid because I was a farm boy. And my dad was a wannabe cowboy Clint Eastwood type. But when I used to buy black comics on the black market, one of the first comics that appealed to me so much that I actually latched onto the character and never let it go was this issue of Thor. And I don't. I think it was mainly because of the battle between the what seemed like two different religions on the cover rather than two different characters on the cover. You know what I'm saying? Like they represented like a pagan religion versus Catholic or whatever. And as somebody who was raised Catholic, I was filled with guilt at the time. Like anything that felt good, it was bad. You know what I'm saying? Like, I mean, Coke was, I'm talking about drinking Coke, not Coke itself, but you know, obviously Coke was a sin. You know? Sex was bad. All these things were bad. And I was surprised to learn that Bob had kind of a similar experience. Bob?
You're wanting me to discuss this, eh?
Yes,
First of all, hello everybody. Glad to be here. Yeah, I my experience was an evangelistic church that was right across the street. My folks were not religious. Well, maybe they were. I don't know. But they didn't go to church. But they felt that I should go to church, and they sent me across the street to the citywide Gospel Tabernacle, which was a great looking little church. It was a shotgun shack with a cross outside that lit up that said Citywide Gospel Tabernacle in neon. And a minister with a shock of white hair and this voice. And it was great, but it was kind of a Billy Graham type evangelism. It wasn't the current extreme right-wing evangelism. It was tried to be very inclusive, but there were no black people in the church, but they would have loved it if there had been.
Yeah.
But it was very fundamental, and you quickly found out after my folks said, this was about 70, I was about 7 years old. My folks sent me there, and I quickly found out that all of us were probably going to hell if we didn't accept Jesus. And I was taken with this, and I began to pray incessantly for myself and my family and my friends. And one day, not too long after I'd been going, my dad found me praying, and he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I'm praying." And he said, "Well, that's okay. What are you praying for?" And I said, "Well, you're all probably be going to hell, and I don't know what." And he said, "Look, you got to understand, you have to go to church because your mom wants you to go. But don't take it too much to heart." And that was complete cognitive dissonance. Either I'm going to hell or I shouldn't take it all to heart, one or the other. But my mom wanted me to go, and I continued to go for it was about another 12 years, and I was never sick, so I didn't miss any Sundays, and they were convinced I was going to become a minister. And I was bored out of my mind. But what happened was that I've been a Shakespearean director. In my odd times when I couldn't get comic book work the last decade or so, I founded more than a decade or so, I founded a Shakespeare festival. And I loved Shakespeare, and part of the reason was that I had to memorize all these Bible verses that were written in the King James version, and that's Shakespearean language. Yeah. So by the time I got to high school, I understood Shakespeare, which was crazy. That also is one of the things that got me about comic books, is that Stan Lee was riffing on Shakespeare. And he loved Shakespeare, and Thor is Prince Hal, and Volstagg is Falstaff,
Oh,
and
yeah,
Odin is King Henry IV. So there you go.
That's you're absolutely right. That's one of the things I pulled away from church too. Was you had the luxury of having your parents say, "Hey, it's fine. You don't have to pray for everything. It's fine. Um, and you can touch your penis when you pee. It's fine. Like it's not a sin."
They didn't go that far. They didn't go that far.
But one thing I did pull away from that
They didn't mention that they didn't know the word penis. I don't think it existed in their vocabulary. But
much less. Oh well, onanism certainly. There.
But one thing I did pull away from it was the language, like that crossed over into like Shakespeare, and it was, and I think that's another reason why I was able to relate to Norse mythology and mythology in general, was because when they started talking in the thee and thou, it was easy for me to kind of translate that, where others were like, what does this mean?
Well, it's interesting because like I came the other way around. I grew up with these comics, and so I remember when I went to college and I was a English lit major, and I started taking my first course in Shakespeare, and we did Henry the Fourth, parts 1 and 2, and when it came to when I was finally introduced to that that wonderful character Falstaff, I remember thinking, oh my God, he's just like Volstagg, the voluminous. In other words, I can look back when I was a kid and say that the cartoons and all that stuff that were on TV, excluding like the beautiful Max Fleischer stuff and the really good Looney Tunes stuff, but the cartoons that they were putting out when I was a kid that were new were trash. But with the comic books, I can look back and say I was in good hands.
Yeah. Now, speaking of comics, like Bob, the way you were introduced to comics is kind of a unique type of way too, right? I mean, like you were in a hospital. Is that correct?
Yeah. Well, my folks, this is before I learned to read. My folks would occasionally buy me a comic book, one of the Ducks, some Karl Barks, and or Mickey Mouse, and expect that if I had it, I would eventually learn some words or something, words and pictures. They were bright enough to realize that was a good combination, but not much. And when I was 4, there was apparently, my folks said, I don't remember it, but I think I was ill, and I was coughing up blood. They said, vomiting blood, and that's the part I don't remember. I remember being ill. Anyway, they were scared shitless, and they took me to the hospital, and they didn't know what was wrong with me in the hospital. They couldn't figure it out. And apparently I stopped feeling awful almost immediately, but apparently all the tests indicated that I was still pretty sick, but they didn't know what it was. And so I was in a private room, and they kept giving me comic books. And I had quite a stack of comic books. Some of them I can remember, Batman, Superman, and then some were various and sundry of the minor league comics of the time, which always seemed more fascinating to me. And but I couldn't read them yet. But I finally got what was the equivalent of a shopping bag full of them. And after several days in the hospital, they could not figure out what was wrong. They were actually going to do an exploratory, and they started to wheel me out. And the nurse noticed me scratching behind my ear and looked, and she said, "Oh my God, you have measles." And the doctor came in and said, "He's got measles. Get him out of here." And because I was in the children's ward, and measles is the most, probably the most contagious disease, probably even perhaps more so than COVID-19.
Timeline back then? When did this happen? Was it in the 40s or the 50s?
Yeah, it'd been the late 40s.
You're so lucky you got the measles and they never cut you open and started exploding.
Oh my
because,
God!
No
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah, no
hospitals
TB
back
either.
then were maybe a step above a butcher shop.
Right. Well, the important thing about this is that it's so contagious that I had touched all of those comics and they had to send them home with me.
Oh, that's awesome.
So I developed. So I immediately I had a comic collection for after first grade when I learned to read, and I really wanted to read Donald Duck in Old California. I thought that was the niftiest looking comic book I had ever seen, and Carl Barks again. And I was so pissed off at the end of my first year of first grade that I still really was not prepared to read that comic because Barks was amazingly sophisticated, actually. And so by about 2 months of the summer, but I had learned the tools. I could read that comic and could read anything after that. So there was a different kind of breakthrough, and I distinctly remember that. I finally got a copy of it a couple of years ago. I ordered one online and said I've got to read that again, and still pretty good read.
That's amazing.
That's so, obviously comics were something special and close to you from a very early age.
Yeah, comics were. Well, the thing is, at my age, comic books were. I'm just a little bit older than. I was about 10. I was about 10 years older than most of the people that started at Marvel at about the same time I did. And what had happened was that it was about the time that DC was relaunching all of their old superheroes. I remember I had a copy of the Flash, of the relaunch of the Flash, and I thought that's very cool. But very quickly after that, I lost interest in comics, and comics really were not written to be read the way they are now. The idea was that you would cycle out of being interested in comic books eventually, and that there was this finite period mainly for boys, and they could even recycle the stories, which they did.
That's what I heard too. I heard that Marvel and DC used to do that a lot, like for generations. Like after a few years, they would just tell all the old stories all over again and go through the same. They would do the same tricks.
And they
Yeah.
were like the pulps in the sense that it was disposable literature. The whole
Right.
idea, the reason it was printed on cheap paper was that it's something that you read and then you crumple it up and then you throw it away.
Yeah. Plus, comics were newsprint. I mean, that was just a given. I mean, that's how they got, they were translated from the newspapers into publications, and newsprint was how they were supposed to be. But yeah, the Wayne Boring Superman was stories that was of course my Superman, and later on they would recycle those stories, some of them. But I lost interest and did other things at that point, and I didn't get back into comics until I was in my 20s when somebody.
Did you learn to draw? Like when you before? I mean, because that's kind of the way it worked for me a little bit. Like I was a slow learner when it came to reading. So I had a mental deficiency. It was called dyslexia, and it stopped me from learning. It stopped me from progressing like the other children in my classroom.
Yeah, it's very difficult for with dyslexia to learn to read. That's now now they recognize that much more strongly and have ways.
Now they have different. Back then, I was called stupid.
Yeah, I was gonna say same thing with like attention deficit disorder.
Or he's just
whatever.
slow.
You were just stupid. Yeah, now they
he's
have
going to
names
be a
for
ditch
these
digger,
things.
or something like
Yeah,
that.
I got the same thing.
Let me ask you a question, like because like you wasn't reading the books at the time, but you must have found the art fascinating. Did you like trace, draw, or like have notebooks where you just sketched out, different things? And
I drew a lot when I was a little kid. Somewhere when I got to first grade, I stopped.
Yeah.
As a cautionary thing to teachers, I will tell you, it was my teacher. One day she said, "Go out and draw what you see on the way to class." And to school, and I drew, grass and trees and a sun, and I made the sun white because
Yeah.
it was one of those bright white days. And she said, "That's wrong. Suns are yellow." And I realized that, I got it. I thought about that a long time and thought, well, I know the sun is white, but she says it's yellow. So what's going on? She's got a book. And in the book somewhere, it says to the first grade teacher, suns are yellow.
Yeah.
And so unless you have a copy of that book, there's no point in drawing
Absolutely.
because you'll get it wrong. So you might as well just not do it. So I stopped for,
No, I totally agree. In fact, that kind of happened to me too, because I learned quickly, like art teachers, the ones that are hired in high schools and junior high and stuff like that, aren't really art teachers. Because art teachers, real art teachers, are like, that's very creative of you. Keep going. Instead of saying you did it wrong.
Yeah.
I wish I could say that things have changed, but a few years ago, the Nebraska Arts Council asked me if I would go around and do workshops at schools. And I said, okay. And went to this one high school, it was a grade school in a different town in Nebraska. And I'll keep it nameless, but the teacher said, watch out for Donnie. And I said, yeah. She said, Donnie's trouble. I said, okay, I'll keep an eye on him. And then the kids all came in and one of them pointed and said, that's Donnie.
Was it now this Donnie you're speaking of? Is this Donnie Cates?
No,
I'm kidding. I'm
this
sure.
is just a kid named Bonnie. And so I had them do with a lot of thick, whatever the school gave me. It's a lot of tempera. But I said, look, okay, we'll I was doing what my first teacher did. Paint what you saw on the way to school. And I watched, and so of course I was keeping an eye on Donnie because I thought, well, what's he going to do? Is he going to throw paint at people? Is he going to get into a fight? And at one point, he looked at his brush, turned around, and used the end of it to start drawing in bark of a tree. And the teacher immediately went over and took the brush away from them and said, Mr. Hall didn't tell you that you could do that. And she went away, and I looked at Donnie. Donnie looked at me, and we both went.
Jesus Christ.
And I thought, yeah, he's a problem, all right. He's a problem.
Him and that stupid creativity.
Those English
that
teachers, and they're like,
creativity will
don't
get you
say
down every
ain't.
time.
Ain't isn't a word. That's just like, it's a word if people use it. Don't tell me it's not a word. But yeah, if anything, they stifle creativity.
I didn't get back into drawing in any kind of serious way until I was in junior high school. And then I became a horror movie fan. The Hammer films were just velocity.
You do not say.
And
Hammer.
And I saw the horror of Dracula and thought it was perhaps the best
Brian
movie ever made.
Yeah.
Pull your pants up, and I think it's Hammer time.
Oh, I'm sorry. Sorry about that.
And at the same time, Famous Monsters of Filmland came out, and oh God, what's his name? The guy that did all the covers. I'm blanking on it. For Basil Goggle.
Oh yeah, of
course. I wanted to be able to do portraits like Basil Goggle, and I started doing portraiture, and drew Peter Cushing, Christopher Lee, and all those people, and got pretty good at it. And that was that was what I did for a long time, is just portraiture. I couldn't draw figures worth a damn, but that came later. But that got me back to drawing. But it really was junior high, plus having a couple of friends who were artists, and we wanted to draw Tarzan too, and Sherlock Holmes.
Bob, I know like you're mainly known for your work at Marvel and on like Valiant's Shadow Man and stuff like that, but like digging deep into your past, I found a couple of Charlton covers that you did.
Yeah,
and these are phenomenal.
This one I think is my favorite thing I did for years. After that, I didn't do anything quite as good as that because I didn't ink my own stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm not, it's funny, as a penciler, I've never felt that I quite was able to give the inker the right information. I end up drawing when I ink, and so I've always enjoyed inking my own stuff. And after the Valiant stuff, I never really, I mean the Charlton stuff, I never really had a chance again for quite a while to ink my own. But I
kind of see that
working
too.
for Charlton.
Like the work looks. I don't want to insult you in any way, but the work does look better. You know, from what I understand, like no penciler is ever happy with their inker.
That's right. Yeah,
Rarely,
absolutely.
rarely.
Because
But if
a lot of the drawing comes when you're inking your own work. Like you start, you know, like doing things that you didn't see that you should have done when you did your pencils. You know, you see where I'm going with that? Like,
Yeah, yeah. Now there are people like I know Byrne, for instance, you know, looked different when he was inking his own stuff.
yeah.
But if you saw his stuff come through the office, it was remarkably tight pencils.
We're talking about Byrne Hogarth.
No, John Byrne.
Oh, John Byrne. Okay. All right. I thought we were
Um,
talking about the Tarzan stuff for a while.
Whereas Buscema always just, I think, never wanted to be bothered doing finished pencils. I think
Is that one of the reasons why Buscema was one of the fastest pencilers at Marvel?
no, he was one of the fastest pencilers because he was a fast penciler. You watched him, you watched his hand move, and it was like magic. If somebody was doing a magic trick up there, it would just bounce around all over the place, and slowly he would keep going like this and this and this and this and this, and slowly a drawing would emerge. Well, it was like one of those.
Jesus Christ!
When I was a kid,
machine.
they had things that
that's what I was thinking.
you would paint with water, and a drawing would emerge, a hidden drawing would emerge, and John was like that.
Wow.
He mainly, I think he could have probably done 3 to 4 finished pencils pages a day, and could do 5 to 6 breakdown pages. And unfortunately, at that time in Marvel, the rates were, I'm sure John was getting some of the best rates, but they were terribly low. And to really make a living, you had to do as much work as you possibly could.
And
Well,
he
that's
defined the house style at Marvel. The house style at Marvel during the 70s was mostly based on Buscema, wasn't it?
No.
I don't think they really had a house style. You see, that's one of the arguments that here's the thing. I think the 90s established, like firmly established a house style. When they seen how much money Rob Liefeld, Jim Lee, Todd McFarlane, all these guys were pulling in, they were like, everybody from here on out, you have to draw like, you know, Jim Lee or Rob Liefeld. And then I think that caused the house style. But I don't think, like, honestly, like before that, like you guys, like Bob here, Arthur Adams, Sal Buscema, you know, all these guys, I don't think any of you guys would have had a chance if like Marvel said, this is a house, everybody has to draw like John, you know?
The house style was Kirby.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that you made it look like Kirby. A couple of guys did, but only Kirby could really look like Kirby. But the idea that everybody stood with their legs 8 feet apart, and the sense of dynamic, like
that's
John
what
said,
I was about to say. Like it was the technique behind the art instead of
that's the word I was going to use
actually
regarding this cover was it's dynamic.
Yeah.
And the some ideas, like John would say, if somebody throws a punch in Marvel, it isn't just a punch. Look at a tennis player, and if you look at a tennis player following through on a real hard swing, that's what a Marvel punch looked like, you know.
Yeah.
So it was that sense of that kind of dynamism that was the heart, the house style, and that did make it different than DC. DC was still kind of living in the Infantino early Gil Kane. Kane adapted to Marvel style when he got to Marvel, but and Joe Kubert. It was a much more graceful style, I think. Sometimes the DC. I mean, Kubert. There's nobody more graceful than Kubert.
Oh,
But
love Kubert.
but there's
Carmine
nobody more
Infantino.
dynamic than John Buscema.
Right.
You know,
Absolutely.
so-
I'd have to agree with that in spades.
Yeah. And you could love both styles. That's the thing, is there was always that war. Well, are you Marvel? Are you DC? If you
John-
were like a kid growing up in the 70s like I was, you went up to that spinner rack, you were reading them both.
Yeah.
Well,
Buscema,
I was mainly
Buscema
Marvel.
thought the
I was
best guy
mostly
in
Marvel,
comics
too.
was either Kirby, because he respected the fact that Kirby was so creative, but I think the artist he admired most was Kubert.
Interesting. I especially love Kubert's Tarzan comics. I mean, to me, he drew the definitive
Well, John-
Tarzan.
John was, I think it was one of the few times I thought John may have been a bit intimidated because he followed Kubert with Tarzan.
Ooh. Ah, that's rough.
And
That's rough.
He did a damn good Tarzan, but Kubert's was probably better.
Yeah,
When I,
it's a tough act to follow.
when I met up with Mike Zeck at a convention, and I was asking Mike, I was like, your style is so badass, and it's like a minimalist style, right? It's like not, and he goes, it's like that because they rushed us through every fucking piece. It's like we had to
not a lot of
deliver
lines.
pages like it was going out of style. It was like, I didn't want to draw like that. It's like, that's just the way it happened.
Yeah, well, I mean, when you compared those incredible Punisher illustrations that he did, he was the guy that made that character was very obscure, made him popular because he was just obsessed with them. You looked at those posters and they were striking. They were airbrushed and everything. And then you looked at like some of the like the interior of like Secret Wars, and it was just
Well, that's what I was exposed to first. I was, the interior Secret Wars, and I was like, this
Yeah.
is phenomenal. But Mike was like, no. And just like what Bob said, like, it was all about getting the pages done, wasn't it? Because you guys were making a living back.
And Secret Wars, you got to remember, Secret Wars was written by Shooter,
Yeah.
and Shooter. Look at my stuff that I did with Shooter, and I think the stuff I did with Shooter was crap. And I don't mean that his writing was crap. It just was.
Was it his direction?
West Coast
Like,
Avengers
because he
was
was
good.
the editor at the time?
No, I didn't like it. I didn't like the Avenger. I felt that it was too miniaturized. Jim liked you to pull the camera back and be sure that people were understanding clearly what was going on.
Yeah.
And that made a certain amount of sense, although I felt that readers had become more sophisticated and they did understand what people who did more interesting shots were doing. But be that as it may, he was the boss and we did it. But I always thought it was it wasn't exactly where I lived as an artist, and I always felt I just didn't think I did a very good job on.
So you
on,
weren't happy. You weren't.
I
happy.
wasn't happy with my own work, and
You were working on a team book
Yeah.
when you were under Shooter?
Yeah, I was. He asked me to do the Avengers. I did a nice little run on the Avengers, and it's sometimes it pisses me off that the iconic thing that I did, the thing that actually probably deserves the term iconic, if anything does, and I'm not sure anything does, but with a couple of exceptions of just a few things that are really amazing, but is that thing of the Yellow Jacket slapping the Wasp.
Everybody keeps saying that, and I
And
think
I'm
they
always asked
focus on
about it,
that.
and I'll almost usually just bring it up
It's a classic
early
moment.
because everybody ends up asking about it. But the truth is that Jim says, well, he wanted it different, and we still will argue about that. That I think, well, you were the editor in chief, you should have sent it back. He says there wasn't time, but he had a lot of other stuff redrawn all the time.
Yeah, but Bob, don't you think maybe the Wasp did get a little mouthy, and she kind of
I think
She was just you know. Oh God, she was asking.
It happens between me and Brian every now and then, and I just, yeah.
but I will tell you that at that time, I think subtlety was not what I had learned. I had learned dynamism,
Right.
and that if somebody, if somebody whacks somebody, because she's also a superhero, right? And if somebody whacks another superhero, they go flying. So that's what I drew, and I, it probably, if he did ask me to do it now, I would do it entirely differently. So I justify his
Well,
reaction to it.
Well,
There's
it's like
another part
it's
of
like
that
a
too.
gritty, you know, you're talking about like, you know, the real dark, you know, side of life, you know, like that's the sort of thing you would expect to be presented in almost like a hyper-realist or a neo-realist style.
Yeah, but you know what, Brian? It
Well,
could have been
it's a
worse. Like
superhero comic.
if that was done in the '90s, there would be exit wounds. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying?
Oh, well,
Like-
that's, oh, yeah, no, her head would have was flown right off.
And if I did it now, I would do a subtle slap, and I would do it hyper realistically, and probably it would be more to the point, but nobody would remember it.
Right. Exactly.
It's such
It's
a
funny-
weird
it's
thing
funny
to be
how things
remembered
like that
for.
work
You know what
out.
I'm saying? Like
Oh,
all
yeah.
this body
Well-
of work you got, and you're remembered
Oh
for
my
the slap.
God.
And you're remembering something that is what? Like, this is like 40 years ago. And the fans
No,
still
right?
ask me about this thing, and I think, what were you doing for the last 40 years? Exactly what in your life?
Can I interrupt
Make
you,
you
gentlemen,
give
for
a
a
shit
minute?
about this.
Can I
I was
interrupt you?
thinking about the slap. What I should have done. It was.
Can I interrupt you fellas just for a minute? Anybody that's just tuning in, we're talking to the legendary Bob Hall here. If you're not familiar with him, you need to correct that immediately. He comes from a background in the theater, which I find really interesting, which I definitely want to ask you a couple of questions
And
about.
if you are curious, just listen, because I'm being legendary right here, right now. We're creating legends here tonight. So
Also, if you want to commission Bob is open for commissions at the moment, and the links are in the description for Bob's website and his agent.
Let me just rattle off some credits here. We're talking Supervillain Team Up, which, you know, is a comic that maybe doesn't necessarily, the story doesn't hold up very well now, but as a kid was near and dear to me. Squadron Supreme, West Coast
Oh, God.
Avengers,
Squadron was so
Weird
good.
War Tales.
Yep.
Marvel Team Up, you did the legendary Marvel Team Up with John Belushi on the cover, ready to go toe-to-toe with the Silver Samurai, and Spider-Man trying to stop him like, the Belushi, stop! That's a real samurai! I was just looking at it. I know I've got that here someplace. And then, of course, you also did the, what I think is, well, I can't say it's the best. I could say it's my favorite of the original line of Marvel graphic novels, which was Emperor Doom.
yeah.
Well, you had something to do with the death of Captain Marvel too, didn't you?
No, not a
You didn't?
That was
Oh,
all
damn thing.
Starlin, I think.
No, he's listed on as he's got a credit
Is he?
on there. Yeah.
Well, it's on the internet. It must be true.
Yeah, of course. Everything on the internet's true. Right?
Yeah. Oh no, I've got a Wikipedia site, and I can barely stand to read it because it has about at least, maybe it's not 20%, but a bunch of it just isn't accurate.
You know,
at all.
you can
And I
go
can't
and actually correct it.
You're not allowed to correct your own Wikipedia site.
Are you serious? That's
That ain't
crazy.
right. That ain't right.
That's
We'll
nuts.
set you up. We'll do something.
This is one of my favorite
I'll
books
get you
did,
guys to
too.
correct it, and you can claim that I had something to do with the death of Captain Marvel. That's
We can make stuff up too.
That's right.
Okay.
I don't mind if it's made up.
The Creature Commandos.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that.
My God, that was great.
That was really weird. That was
It
great.
was weird. Like after I read the
In a good
description,
way.
it was like I got the book. I got the book here, but like in the DC universe, like they're not really supposed to have powers. They had operations to look like Frankenstein, to look like
That's right.
It's such a weird concept.
Yeah,
I was like, what?
which is like
It's insane.
that would occur to me if I was concocting D-Day. I would say, and get some guys and surgically make them look like these monsters. 'Cause we know the Nazis. They're just gonna
It's
They're
gonna scare
gonna
the
breathe
living
right through
shit
the
out of
Nazis.
them. They're gonna go whoop 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 whoop.
So aside from the improbability of it the biggest problem with that book was that you were drawing something in the inside, and then you would look at Joe Kubert's cover version of what you'd done and said, I am not worthy. I am not worthy.
Oh, Joe was a beast. Joe still is a beast. Like, he is insanely good. And now, did you ever work with Joe Kubert? Like,
No.
like being the same? Because what I heard is that he draws with both hands. Like, he inks with one hand and draws with the other. It's fucking insane. Like,
Well,
he's,
I don't
he's
know.
a-
No,
he passed away a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
I think maybe about 4 or 5 years ago, was it?
Mhm.
And the last thing he did was Tor, which was, this like caveman story.
Yeah.
Old character, but
He also did a series of his last stuff was a series of he did a bunch of graphic novels like Jew Gangster, and his letters from not Kosovo, but that war. He did a bunch of really remarkable. Oh, he did one. If you find it online, Tex. It's a cowboy thing, and I think it's called just Tex. It might, but I ordered it, and it is the most gorgeous Western thing you've ever seen. It's magnificent.
Well, his
just
work
did-
was always
I'm all
like
over
top
that.
notch. Like, it was, but that's another thing that I'm saying.
Enemy
Like, if
Ace.
it was for a house style, like, you guys would all be drawn the same way. I wouldn't be talking about, wow, Joe Kubert had a great style. I'd be like, yeah, how was it like
Yeah.
imitating Joe Kubert's style?
right. And of course, you had so many other people that had like really dazzlingly different styles. Like
Yeah,
Gene
I mean, it's-
Colan. Always a big fan of Gene
Oh,
Colan.
it was
stuff.
beautiful. Like, those
especially
were
his
golden
horror
ages, dude.
stuff.
I mean, yeah,
Yeah,
like
Col-
you guys.
Colin is probably my favorite. If I had to name a favorite, it would be Colin. Because I always loved
One
the
of mine.
noir stuff, as you can see from the Charlton things. And he was the master of that. Plus, I liked him a lot. And plus, when I did a version of Dracula that ran off, I wrote with another guy a version of Dracula called The Passion of
Passion of
Dracula.
Dracula. I was going to ask
It
you about
ran
that.
off Broadway for a couple of years. Gene and Marv came to see it separately, I think, and then they incorporated it into one of the issues of Tomb of Dracula, and so they have the ostensibly the real Dracula actually coming to the play and being disgusted and tearing destroying the theater.
It's awesome.
Oh my God, I remember that actually. Yeah, because I recently got the the compendium that has like every Tomb of Dracula issue.
Mhm.
And oh my God, that's crazy.
You know
'Cause
what?
I was gonna ask you about that play because I was thinking like, God, it's like Bob's a Hammer fan. He did this Dracula thing. Maybe are we gonna get a comic book adaptation of this at some time?
Well, let me ask you just one thing before we go into your theater work. Two things actually. One, did you ever create an IP or something that you own that you actually?
No.
Did you ever want to do that, or was
Oh,
it
yeah.
just something that wasn't?
Yeah, it just didn't. The opportunity wasn't there at Marvel. I was under contract at Valiant, and while I did create something out of whole cloth called Armed and Dangerous, I didn't own any part of it.
Yeah,
And
because I'm looking at creators now. Like, you got Jim Starlin putting out his Dread Star, and he's got his art book out, the Black Book, and
Yeah.
I don't see anything like that from you. Like, you don't. Do you have an art book out? Like
no.
because I mean, your body of work is humongous. Like, you should
Also a
have.
gallery artist too.
Yeah.
I even look at your gallery art. It's
Oh, I
stunning.
didn't know you was a gallery artist. Like,
Yeah.
that's one thing I have to check out. But
That's on
yeah,
his
that's what I'm
website.
saying. Like, and to be honest, I know. I mean, right now is the perfect time to go ahead and put out IPs. And
well, I'm
get
hoping
interest
to
in
put.
it.
I'm hoping to come up with something. My problem is that I to tell you the truth, I just there was a time when I was trying to get stuff going, but it was at that point where comics were in the toilet.
Yeah.
And I couldn't seem to get anything moving. I got a contract with one thing and realized it was just never going to get distributed.
Yeah.
And had a chance to start a Shakespeare festival. And so that's what I did, and did
Well-
some comic book work on the side.
Nice.
And I've just been getting back, and I stopped doing that about 3 years ago, and then after 15 years. And so I'm looking for something now. And I'm
Well,
trying to
Bob,
figure out,
like everybody's using crowdfunding. Even Jim Starlin, like Mike Plug and Simon Bisley just put out a book called fucking what is it called?
Can I still
Thicker Than
get that,
Blood.
by the way?
And yeah, you can. Like
Oh.
Thicker Than Blood came out, and that was wildly successful. So was Jim Starlin's book. And, like that's what I'm saying. Like you don't need a distribution service anymore. You just go ahead and distribute it through crowdfunded. And with your body of work, like people would be insane not to go ahead and latch. I mean, and this is another thing too. Like you've also you did design work for Kiss, right? For the comic series.
no, I did.
No?
I did a Kiss, part of a Kiss comic for Platinum.
Yeah. Did you design the characters?
and
I'm
I
about
did.
to buy the character sketch. Remember?
No. I'm sorry. You're right. I did a series of plates for them that were basically the character designs.
Yeah.
And they were based on stuff that was already sketched out, and they needed the front side view. So I did that. I forgot I did that. Yeah, so I'm sorry I contradicted you.
No, it's
Preston's
fine.
like,
I'm
I've got the
wrong a lot.
proof right here.
I'm wrong a lot. And also, one of my other favorite artists, and he's kind of crabby sometimes. I don't know if you're familiar with Neil D. Vokes. So you worked with Neil on Flesh and Blood. And
I kind of worked with Neil. Neil and I went to a hopeless convention in. I'm sorry, Allentown, but this particular convention was hopeless.
Oh.
I imagine it's improved by now, but it was. I had the experience it was the first experience I had of what I call being sat behind the wrestlers, and so it was Neil Vokes and me as the guest artists, and a bunch of wrestlers who sort of hung sideways over their chairs in front of us, making it almost impossible to get to us without smelling the wrestlers. I don't mean to be unkind, but nobody.
No, you're keeping it real. It's all good.
Nobody came around, and so we spent a lot of time talking. And he was talking about this project, and so I did some of the back matter for it. It was a backstory in it.
it's really good. Like
that was a Hammer, and it never got finished.
Yeah.
They stopped after I did 3 issues, and then it.
And that's another thing too.
No,
Like Neil's a big Hammer fan as well. Like you both.
Oh yeah. So this is a Hammer project, and this was supposed to be
Operation
the
Satan.
feel of something like the old Quatermass stories,
Nigel Neal.
the black and white stuff that Hammer was doing just before they really broke through with the color horror things. And
I love those movies.
So that's why it has a black and white feel to it. And I loved doing it. I'm sorry we never really finished it up.
You guys had an all-star cast on there too. I mean, you had Brenton doing the covers, you had you doing the backup story, and you had Neil D. Vokes doing the interiors. Like that was a pretty class act that you guys had going on.
Badass.
And Carrie Gamble, I don't know if you know Carrie's work. Carrie Gamble doing the grays on my stuff.
Oh wow!
I did it in black and white, and they said, "It's okay if we have Carrie doing." Rather than coloring it, we did a grayscale thing because we wanted it to look like a film. And I said, no, that's great. So it was really a good thing, and it also was a chance for me to try to demonstrate. I don't think anybody saw it at any of the comic companies, but to say, hey, well, okay, here's what my stuff looks like now. It's evolved. It's a little different.
Yeah, that's one of the things with comic book publishers. Like as far as the big guys too, like they think that once a comic book artist gets like old enough, they have to retire them because they think their style is too old. And the chick that Power Pack, June, I can't remember. I know her first name's June.
Brigman?
Yeah. I talked to her a little bit, and her style is phenomenal. She was knocking out pages at a show, and her husband's the inker, so her husband was inking the pages as she was finishing them, and
That's so cool.
yeah, and she was saying that. I was like, why aren't you working at Marvel or DC right now? And she said, well, they won't give me any work because they said my style is obsolete, like it's too old. So they gave her a cereal box comic to do, and I mean, it was pretty depressing, and it was pretty fucking horrible, to be quite honest, because she's very good,
It doesn't matter. It's what happens. It happens to almost all. There are a few artists with a style. It happens to illustrators too, that lasts. That style. Some of the best illustrators would go out of style.
Like John Burns. John Burns, like he doesn't get a lot of work anymore because of that. But
and magazine illustrators, you could see it. Norman Rockwell is one of the few that went through. But for years, magazine illustrators would try to catch up with whatever was current, because they were scared to death they would never get any more work. And comics are worse than that. I had. I think one of the saddest experiences I had was doing a comic. I edited a comic called, I was an editor for a while at Marvel for a short time.
Absolutely.
And I edited a comic called The Human Fly. And The Human Fly was one of the it wasn't in Marvel continuity. It wasn't a superhero comic. It might not have even been in the Marvel universe.
It was just a
maybe one of the strangest comics Marvel ever put.
I know, because it was a real guy.
Well, I'll talk about that in a second. Let me explain that the best part about it was that you got to work with there a lot of old timers. By old timers, I mean people maybe a little younger than me now, perhaps, would come to Jim and want Shooter and want work and see if there was any work around. And he would send them to me because, first of all, he knew that I liked the old timers. And also because on The Human Fly, they didn't have to have a superhero dynamism. Yeah. They could have come from the Kniff school, and that was fine. So there were people like Frank Springer and Frank, what's his name? He eventually did The Invaders. Frank Robbins, Lee Elias, Bob Lubers, all people that were really good. And it was a lesson to be learned because you looked at how good these guys were, but they couldn't work anymore.
Yeah.
They were not, and they didn't work again at Marvel. Once The Human Fly was done, their day had passed. Well, and you have to, one of the things you have to accept is that it's very probable that your day will pass. When you are not the flavor of the day. The comics are like, being in comics is like being an ingenue in film. There just comes a time when everybody says, wow, Gwyneth Paltrow has the look. And then nobody cares about her candle anymore,
Yeah.
And it happens to almost everybody. There are a few people it even happened to Gene Colan. After a certain length of time, he stopped getting work. Buscema is one of the few people that worked right up until he died.
Yeah.
Kirby, it certainly happened to Kirby. His style was not, the Neil Adams school came in.
I think Kirby's style went out in the 80s, didn't it? Like early 80s?
Dude,
70s.
It went out in the 70s.
Did it
I
really?
remember as a kid looking at his Machine Man comics, and they just felt silly and antiquated. Now, mind you, I'm a huge Kirby fan. I'm not snapping or dissing on him. Right?
I had to grow into Kirby. Like as a kid, I just couldn't accept it. But when I got older, I was like, this is great. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
In
Yeah.
the 60s, people would say we love Kirby because his stuff is the most realistic. Now,
Wow.
Kirby's style was anything but realistic,
No
but
kidding.
what they meant, I think, was convincing. That he created a convincing universe in which it might not look like our universe, but it's the one you wanted to be in.
Yeah.
Right.
And I love that. And
Yeah.
I think he just got a bit, perhaps he did get a bit slapdash. I think when he came back to Marvel, his heart wasn't in it anymore. But because he had created his universe and it didn't sell. All of a sudden his stuff didn't sell. But and people, the Neil Adams look was the look. Now, people like Jim Lee wouldn't exist without Neil Adams, but Neil Adams is not Neil Adams anymore.
No, he's not.
He's not his. He has struggled to try. It looks to me as if he has struggled to try to become
Relevant.
and keep his stuff current. And it's become, the more he works at it, the less it seems to be current.
Yeah.
He doesn't know who the hell I am, so if he sees me at a convention, he won't smack me or anything.
Well, I think there's a problem there. I think you guys, and I don't mean I'm not like trying to go against you or anything like that. I just think that I think maybe Neil is thinking in the past, like where his only options are Marvel and DC, where he doesn't see that if he released something now over crowdfunding, like his fans would come out of the woodwork to support it. You see where I'm going with that? And
Right.
like, it doesn't matter if the big two want to publish you or not. Like, they don't have a say-so anymore. They don't have a say-so because you can go directly to the customer now.
Yeah, I think some of us who got very used to the idea. Maybe Neil has, I don't know. John Byrne for a while of reinventing the Marvel characters, or the DC characters, and I did some Batman for a while, but I
think your best work was Shadow Man, to be honest.
Yeah,
like, I'm not talking about as far as like technically good. I just think it felt like you really enjoyed doing it.
You're saying it wasn't technically good?
No, I don't think it was technically good.
How dare you, Preston?
No, it felt like you were into it. The covers, everything was really, really good. And I was like, and then I was like, who is this person doing this Shadow? And now I realized that it was you. And I was like, holy shit, it's Bob Hall doing Shadow Man. The only other work that stood out to me that you did was Squadron Supreme, like that 12-issue series I thought was insanely good, especially the battle between the Hyperons.
Oh my God.
I thought that was crazy. I was like, holy shit, he just blew his eyes up.
That was fantastic. I love that to pieces when it came out too. Yeah,
but when Shadow Man came out, I was like, well, this isn't a Wall-and-Space superhero. Let me give it a shot, and then it just got better. And let me point out too, to anybody listening, that was maybe the only series Valiant actually made into a television show, from what I understand.
Live action or animated?
I think it was live action. Shadow Man. Yeah, and it was also a video game too. It was a video game as well.
Game. That's why I stopped doing. That's why I stopped doing it.
Really?
I'll tell you the story. Shadow Man was the first time I had tried writing for comics. I'd written for the theater, but I'd never written for comics. I'd gotten pretty adept at some of the storytelling aspects of it, but and I kind of wanted to, but I don't know, just it wasn't what I did, and I'd gotten kind of pigeonholed, and Jim started Valiant, and I wasn't getting much work from Marvel at that point, and so I called him up for work, and he said, well, I don't need pencilers right now, I need writers. And he gave me the choice of about, I think, 5 different series that he said, pick one of these and take it over. And I picked Shadow Man because it seemed to be a failed series. It wasn't that the concept was bad. It was that somehow it wasn't going anywhere. A lot of talented people had been working on it, but it would be like somebody would do one issue, and then the next issue somebody else would be doing it, and it had kind of gone along that way. I took it over to a point where Steve Ditko was doing an issue, and I thought, okay, for a first crack, if I fail, I'm in good company, and if I succeed, I'll look pretty good because it's not going anywhere. And also it's set in New Orleans, which I love that idea, and so they'll have to send me to New Orleans a couple of times.
Bob,
And
I'm sorry
it was
to correct you, but it's New Orleans.
Nolans. Well, it's Nolans.
It's not Nolans,
Uh,
it's New
Nolans.
Orleans.
Nolans.
Sorry about that.
Uh,
We have a friend Anthony. I was just quoting.
the and it was off in a corner of that was the first issue that I worked on. I'm I had to write over a story that already existed.
Yeah.
And then I got to go with it, really go with it the next time. And then eventually, after I'd done about, I think 4 issues, I got to just take over the art as well. And they wanted me to get a running start on it before I tried doing that.
Shit, Steve Ditko did
Yeah.
the first issue that you
Amazing.
Yeah.
wrote for Shadow Man. That's insane.
And
Did you-
but
did
like
you
I
meet
said, I didn't
Ditko?
really plot it. I didn't get to work with Ditko. Ditko it was in the drawer, and they said somebody's got to put the dialogue in this.
Oh, so it's the
Okay,
Marvel way.
because he was like notoriously reclusive, from what I
Yeah.
hear.
So anyway, I did it, and it worked. And so that was the story with that. I did it for about 30 some issues, upper 30s issues. It ended, my run ended with issue 43. I don't know why I remember that, because I don't remember the numbers of these things. But one day they wanted me to change the look of the guy from being a Creole to being a black man, to being an African American. And I said, well, that's a different character.
Right.
And couldn't quite figure it out, and went home and thought about it. And I said, oh, I got it. They've done demographics because at that time Acclaim had taken over, and they wanted everything made into a game of some kind. And so they had done the demographics and decided the game would sell better if the character was black. And I had no problem with it. I had a lot of African American characters in the book, but to me it wasn't Jack Boniface anymore.
Yeah.
If I did that. So I said, look, why don't I wind the series up with him, and you can do what you want. I'm going to give you the chance to do what you want with the character, and then I'll go on and do something else. And I went on and doing this series called Armed and Dangerous, which if you haven't read, you got to pick up some Armed and Dangerous and take a look at it. It's probably, I think, the best thing I've ever done.
I'll check it out.
That's your noir comic, right? Your crime
What?
comic.
It's my crime comic. And so what I did was I had one problem I had going into the series was that Jack had been told by somebody from the future that he died in 1999. And so it was something that hung over his head. And every once in a while I would bring it up and I would think, what am I going to do with this? And finally I gave him a nervous breakdown and decided he had to find out if he could die before 1999. And so I did this sequence where he became a jumper on the ledge of a building in the last issue and finally jumped to see if he could die. And I left him halfway down and said, okay, if they want him to survive, I'll tell them how to do it. And if they don't want him to, he can become a fly speck on a grease spot on the pavement. They never did anything with it. They just more or less ignored it. And,
Oh man, and you
You
handed
choose
them
the
a
middle
beauty.
way.
and I offered Dinesh that had me do one special where I finished that up when Dinesh Hamdasani took over, relaunched Valiant. And they actually, I think they bought the story, but they decided they couldn't do it. They just didn't want to go back to any of the 90s creators.
That second iteration of Valiant was horrible. Like I didn't like it. I thought they tried to revamp the characters, but they didn't know what they were doing. Yeah.
Well, what people liked the Shadow Man, but what they didn't get and what wasn't happening in the relaunch to me was Shadow Man was basically a comedy with serious overtones from time to time, but it was a comedy. And, there was a certain absurdity to it. I don't mean it was like a laugh a minute type comedy or like Archer and Armstrong that was truly a comedy, but it was all written with a certain sense of absurdity.
Yeah.
Right.
And I tried to explore the absurdity of being a superhero, and there's a certain absurdity about New Orleans as well. And I don't mean absurd like
no, you're right.
dumb.
You're absolutely.
But it's a place where people dress up and drag all the time, and
Well, we dress up and drag. I don't personally, but I know during Mardi Gras, it's free for all. It's like if you get drunk, and if you get drunk enough, you find yourself in a dress somewheres, or and that's no bullshit. That's actually true. And then I remember distinctly being drunk in like when you go down Bourbon Street during Mardi Gras, like literally you don't walk. You kind of just flow with the crowd. Like you can't walk.
Right.
And then a few times I ended up on a balcony, like throwing beads to some chick and having her show me her boobs. It was, but this is normal shit. This isn't anything out of the ordinary. And another thing that's cool about New Orleans is you can walk around with liquor, like open containers. It's no big deal,
And then there's the other end of it where I got the names through somebody I knew of two rival voodoo queens of New Orleans, and they hated each other. I had the chance to go down and interview both of them. And,
they were alive. Okay.
Yeah, they were current, and so that stuff. There's still a currency to that kind of mysticism as well, which permeates the feel of it. So,
see, that's what I like too, is that they actually flew you down here. Is that right? To go ahead and interview the voodoo queens?
Yeah, and once I think they gave me a trip once, and then I think a couple of other times I came down on my own.
Yeah. Now it doesn't work like that. They're like, "Hey, you're about to Skype with those two voodoo queens," and
well, I wonder if these were the same. If one of these was the same voodoo queen that Del Close encountered. I don't know if you guys know who Del Close was.
No.
Okay.
The thing with New Orleans was that you could, I always felt inadequate, but I think nonetheless that I really wanted to go down and live there for a while, but so I created a fictional New Orleans. My New Orleans wasn't the real New Orleans. It was bits and pieces of it that I would work in anything that had happened when I went there, and I worked in a lot of the people that I met there, but little bits and pieces of just where he would go to have breakfast, stuff like that I think helped a lot too with the feel of the book, as opposed to just being kind of generic supernatural, which I think to me is what it became when they tried to relaunch it. They kept not making New Orleans a character.
Well, I've had a few chances to sit down with Jim Shooter, and Jim Shooter to me is one of the greatest, nicest guys I've ever met.
Lovely guy.
Yeah. And I have to say,
I always liked him. Some people didn't, but I always liked him a lot.
I like him because I'm a workaholic, but I'm also really regimented, like disciplined when it comes to doing what I do. And I respect Jim because Jim came in there and he's like, okay, things are going to be on time from here on out. This is going to happen this way. And I don't think now one thing I have to say about myself as an artist is that I'm always late, and not on deadlines so much, but if you tell me to be somewhere, it's most likely I'm going to be late. I'm really early. I was late to my wedding. Both
shame
times.
on you. Oh,
you know what I'm saying? Like,
shame on you.
And it's just that's just the way it is. I tried to bend to, but I mean, I'm just going to be there when I'm going to be there, and that's all there is to it. And I got a feeling like most artists are like that. I don't know if you're like that, Bob. I got a feeling like there is a rebellious streak within you, that's like, don't tell me what to do kind of thing.
Most creative people, I would say.
But and that's one thing Jim had to deal with when he's walking into this bullpen of artists and trying to say, okay, we're going to revamp everything, but he gave me one thing I can say about Jim Shooter is, he likes to call me Little Frazetta, some shit like that. You know what I'm saying? But yeah, he was like, yeah, this guy fucking Frazetta right here, whatever.
No wonder you like him.
But I fucking loved the guy. I loved him before he started calling me that. But I'm just saying, like, but at the same time, while he was saying your work's great, he would tear you down. You know what I'm saying? Like, he would say, okay, now here comes the editor, and he'd be like, well, this sucks. Don't do this again. This is a tangent. Why would you do that? These cities are matchboxes. This is not going to happen again, and stuff like that.
But useful stuff, right?
It was definitely useful, but I can see now another thing about Jim Shooter. From what I understand, like Jim was, he got his first job at 16 or something like that
15,
as a writer.
I think.
I don't know. I mean, it sounds like you and Jim, like Jim likes you,
Jim was on the board of directors after he left Marvel. Jim was on the board of a little theater that I started in New York, a little off Broadway Shakespeare theater, and Jim was on the board of that, and actually Stan was as well. But Jim actually came to meetings. I asked Stan to be on the board, and he said, I'm in California all the time. I can't be on the board of a theater. And I can't come to any meetings. And I said, wrote back and said, Stan, I don't want you to come to any meetings. I just want to be the only theater in New York that has Stan Lee on the board of directors.
Right.
And he wrote back and said, well, fine. Somewhere I've got the letter, and we printed it in our first program. It said, I'm willing to be on your board if I never have to come to any meetings, and you promise you'll never do any adaptations of DC Comics. So,
oh man,
awesome. But I've always liked Jim. I think we had we never had any real falling outs, but I think we disagreed about some stuff. But that's what makes art and creative people tick. I think is you have your way of wanting to do stuff, and
sometimes it's that friction that produces.
Well, that's
greatness.
one thing. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I don't see. I can't imagine a house style being a good thing. You know what I'm saying? Because you're not only at this point, you're not saying, well, you need to fix this in your work. You're actually telling people, don't draw like the way you naturally want to draw. Yeah,
don't be yourself.
Yeah, this is
take the thing that makes your art special and different from everybody else's, and get rid of that.
Yeah, because it don't sell. I want you to draw like Jim Lee.
I think that the only thing I will say about that is that there is a certain, there isn't a DC house style. There wasn't a Marvel house style, but Batman always had to look like Batman, and he had to look however Batman looked currently.
Yeah.
And you would get a model sheet for Marvel, and and you could change the costume perhaps if you were Frank Miller, or but you had to go to the editors, and then everybody else would have to change that. And within the superhero genre, I think there is a sameness, so that for us who are intricately involved in this business, we will look at the different styles of different people and say, boy, there's a lot of different styles going on.
Yeah.
If I show it to civilians, people who aren't fans, it tends to all look alike to them. And they don't see those subtle differences. I think if they read a few, they would begin to, and what happens is, like, back in the day when I was a kid, and you'd read Donald Duck, and then you'd look at somebody else's Donald Duck, and so Carl Barks became known as the Good Duck Man, and his was better, and somehow you knew that but there was a house style at Disney. It's just he did it better than anybody else.
Yeah.
Right.
So that I think we sometimes deceive ourselves that there's not a house style.
Well, I mean,
'Cause-
there's sticking to a model, like being on model whenever you're doing a character, you know,
And I was just thinking of like when Bernie Wrightson did Batman in Swamp Thing, since he took Batman and put him in the Swamp Thing's world, he got to make his cape like 20 feet long.
that
Yeah.
would be, that would, I think, would be an interesting test to see, would people feel that was remarkably different, or would somebody just walking in say, his cape's way too long?
Right.
We thought it was wonderful, you know.
Yeah.
Well,
Sometimes people can't wrap their heads around the idea of impressionism or expressionism.
well, Kelly Jones is also one of my favorite Batman artists, and his Batman changes from page to page. But one thing that did stand out about Kelly Jones is he would always make Batman's ears like 3 feet tall.
Yes.
You know, like the horns, like it would be way up there, and nobody ever said anything about that. I think it's because Kelly Jones sold, you know, like his style was marketable,
Mhm.
you know, and
Every comic book artist, it's like you want them to show you the characters the way that they see them, show you the world the way that they see it, and certain art clicks with certain people, certain art doesn't click with other people. And then I think, Bob, you're talking about like regular people who aren't comic book fans. A lot of them, they don't even know how to read a comic book. Like they literally don't know where your eye is supposed to go. It's like something that you need
I like to call it
learn.
art blind. Like a lot of them are art
blindness
blind
is
too.
what Preston
Like
calls it.
they don't
But it's
really
like-
recognize what's good or bad about art styles. They just know that it's Donald Duck. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
the small tweaks that an artist does to it to make his mark, they don't really see that at all. They just see Donald Duck. In fact, it can be so bad to where somebody can see something being good when it's actually like some 2-year-old like just sketching
Well,
it out.
American Idol
And
syndrome,
there
I
will be
call it.
subtle things like that I think do register with people. I think I like things that are kind of loose. They're in drawing style.
Yeah.
There are people who don't want to see anything unless it's tight as a drum, and neat. And neatness is very important to them. So they might think that things look kind of like, but they would still be drawn toward whichever their preference intrinsically is. Also, it just occurred to me that my granddaughter could probably tell you, identify separate manga artists, which I could not.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. That's a hard one too.
Yeah.
Like manga.
About
I
house
know that-
styles.
I can tell that the person who drew Lone Wolf and Cub I liked.
Kazuo
Yeah.
Koike.
But as it gets into certain other people's styles, I say I can't tell the difference. That doesn't mean there isn't a difference. It just means that it's not my. So that I would be the same person that I'm describing looking at superheroes for the
No,
first time.
you're
Right,
you're
right.
absolutely
All-
right. Like
All
back in
these
the
guys
day,
are alike.
when
Yeah.
when I was new to collecting, I was really serious. I was like, oh my God, I love this artist, that artist. Like you didn't have to sign the work for me to be able to tell who drew the work. You know what I'm saying? Like I could
yeah,
instantly
man.
say Bob Hall did that, Arthur Adams did that, that's
Mike
John
Ploog.
Burns. Exactly. Plug's over here. And it was just their signature was in their artwork. You know,
Yes.
and it was so easy to pick, and it's still kind of easy, but with
Yeah,
modern comics, I can't do it, you know, because modern comics, I think with modern comics, they're all using digital models and they're all using the same exact tools, you know,
Soulless.
within their digital. It's all digital to begin with, and that's another thing that throws me a little bit, because I think it destroys the original art market, you know. So like
Yeah.
collectors don't have a lot to collect anymore. But I think whenever you stick with digital, you also tend to fall into the pitfalls, like duplicating panels like 1,000 times, or tracing out of magazines and stuff like that. And it goes well past doing morgue files like you guys used to do, which I still do. I still use a morgue file where I'll use it as reference, but I won't blatantly take it and trace it. You know what I'm saying? Like, so yeah, I mean, I don't want to put you in I don't know if you're still working like as far as like in the mainstream.
No.
But I don't want to put you in a position where you have to comment on that and put yourself in a bad way with anybody that might potentially hire you in the
Yeah,
future.
no need to incriminate
You know?
yourself, sir.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's like anything else. I think that the first of all, I think working on a Cintiq, for instance, it's a tool. It's like any other tool, and you can do what you like. I think some people have found an intrinsic style that to them comes out of working digitally. My digital work tends to look as if I'd inked it. So I arrange my digital tools so that they look as if I can get a thick, thin line. I can ink with it.
So you do work digitally, like
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Is it because
Well-
it's quicker, or is it because there's no mess?
Well, there's a couple of things. What I've been doing lately, I've been working with somebody on educational comics,
Okay.
and if you go to World of Viruses,
Oh, yummy.
and you just enter that, and you'll see the most recent one is we got a grant, which has really gotten me through the COVID-19 period with no conventions. Really,
We need
well.
to talk after the show, Bob, because you should be doing way better doing this COVID-19 thing than what you're doing.
This is no, I could not do better.
Okay, I'm not going to
than
argue
doing
with
this
you.
particular. No, because it's a National Science Foundation grant,
Yeah.
and so I was able to. I did a lot of it, but I was also able to hire a couple of other comic parts.
Oh, damn, you are doing good.
I used Bob Camp for a while.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
We were paying like $1,000 a page.
Motherfucker.
Nice.
You need a cover artist?
Yeah. Well, you wanted to share that wealth a little bit, and it was like it was going to run out. I mean, it was limited, but
Yeah.
and so it was a good deal. It was a good gig for right now. At this particular time, it was a good gig, and it was. I got to draw funny animals.
Yeah.
Because I wanted to. I got to write it, and so we created a group of funny animals. But I could have done it by hand, but I still would have scanned it in, because you're working with scientists and everything got vetted and vetted and vetted. And so I would constantly be having to change we have bats in it because they're might have spread, the disease might have evolved from bats. And our bat person would say, you don't have this quite right yet. And digitally, of course, correcting that is nothing. By hand, you're putting a patch on it, or
No,
redrawing
I
this or
totally
that.
get it. You can only do that so many times.
Yeah. And so digital, I've done 3 projects with them, and they've all been good, but digital has been the way to go on it.
Yeah.
But what I've learned in it is that I love the sort of look. It's still a back in the day look that I do. And one thing that I can't quite bring myself to do, even though I will color some of it, is let the coloring carry the inking rather than the inking carrying the inking.
Yeah.
And that's really, to me, the big difference between most current artists and artists of my generation, is that
The colorists are working way harder nowadays than the artists themselves.
and the idea is you're supposed to leave room for the color. You may do a guide for them as to lighting, but you're not necessarily going to do hatching or those kinds of things, with some exceptions. I think there are guys that I think do it pretty well. Deodato, for instance, I think does a good. He bridges a gap between old style and new style, and Lionel Yu and a few people like that.
Yeah.
I can understand, the notion that digital is just another tool. It's just another technology. On the downside, you're left with a file. You don't have the original art. Preston, I'm blanking on his name. The guy who did Berserkanaut,
Oh, that's God damn it.
which is
Hold
wonderful,
on, wait a
by the
minute. I'll
way.
pull it up real quick.
Yeah, he did this absolutely beautiful, gorgeous, hand-painted comic, and he did it all on copy paper because he said he didn't want it to be something precious.
That was Jeff Lafferty.
Jeff Lafferty, yeah,
Yeah. And
and you're just like, dude, like this is beautiful art. This should be on something that where you could put,
he did it on
it's
copy
not a
paper
canvas.
because he didn't want it to be precious. That's what he said.
Yeah.
Like he didn't want it to be, I guess, collectible. I was like,
Well,
that's so weird.
I think he had an attitude like I don't know. There's a childlike quality to it, childlike as opposed to childish, and a sense of fun. Right?
But
It feels like it was made by by an adult that was trying to make a comic book like a kid.
yeah, Jeff's actually a veteran from '90s. He's a '90s artist. He worked on Doom 2099,
Yes.
and he just his style just he was one of those guys that accidentally got hired. You know, like when they acquired Malibu's Ultraverse, they acquired Jeff Lafferty. And I guess they didn't know what to do with him, so they stuck him on Doom 2099. And his style went against every house style they had at the time. So it was hard for him to kind of fit within that Marvel mold that they wanted him to fit into. So he didn't. And he went ahead and he did the Berserkanaut. And I really enjoyed this the book.
Dude. How great is
I wanted
Cyber
more,
Frankenstein?
you know?
Exactly.
Yeah, it has a little bit of a Beasley quality to it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's what attracted me to it. And that's another
Yeah.
artist too. Like Bisley is one of those artists where his style, I mean, you could probably duplicate it digitally, but I don't think it'd be as easy as what you would think it would be, to go ahead and do that.
You can see the ink strokes in his stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, it's all there, and it's what makes it wonderful, I think.
Yeah. It's what gives it that handmade quality. And so many things, comic books, films, music,
My whole thing
all
is
missing that handmade quality. And I know when I get pages from an artist that I'm working with, they're so beautiful. I don't want to have them inked and colored. And
I went back to traditional art because I was doing digital. I did digital for like a few issues of Road Trip, but my problem was I'm OCD, and OCD doesn't blend well when you got a magnifying glass, and you can zoom in as much as you want, 200-300 times on a piece that you're working on. And I would spend days on a cover or days on a page. And I finally had to quit because my OCD wouldn't allow me not to use that magnifying glass. So I went back to traditional art. And now, something good happened too. Like now, if I spend 30 or 40 hours on a cover painting, I can actually sell that painting. I can hold that painting and I can make it digital by going ahead and taking a photo of it, or
Sure.
scanning it if it's small enough.
Well, in a certain way, everything is digital because like, everything gets everything I do. I did part of a before this one that I was working on. I did a educational comic book on mosquitoes, and got to do a couple of pages that I thought were great fun. So that they wanted a sense that a Godzilla-like mosquito with a poster, and I did them by hand, but of course he scanned it all in and colored. I colored them digitally, and also you'd put them in and clean it all up digitally, and you'd do in other words, the artist now ends up doing some of the production work.
Exactly. Yeah, and that's a way for companies to save money too when
Yeah,
it
sure
comes
is.
down to hiring somebody up. Well, it's not enough to be a penciler anymore. Can you ink your work? Can you color your work?
Right.
You know?
Yeah, one
Um,
person is expected to do the work of three people.
yeah.
Yeah.
Let's talk about something a little bit different. Let's go
Okay.
into Bob's theater antics. And we're going to start out. Bob, you had a big theater orgy or something like that. Is that correct? Or
I don't.
How-
I
You and
think
the
I
cat, the
remember that.
cats,
I
think
would
it was.
remember
Is
that.
that right?
I don't. Or maybe I wouldn't. Maybe it was that good that I don't remember it. I don't know. What
Passion
the
of
hell are you
Dracula.
talking about?
What you talking about, boy? Passion of Dracula was evidently filmed and aired on Showtime.
Yeah, it was really terrible.
Oh,
Did
because I was
see
going to
Passion
ask
of
you, like, where
Dracula?
can I see this
Let me see
thing?
something. Wait a minute.
Somebody
It's on
else asked me
IMDb.
that, and I can't. Somewhere I have a CD of it, and I can't find it. It was the first. It was on Showtime.
Mhm.
It was the first Showtime filmed drama that they ever tried. They chickened out on it. There were two problems with it. It's distinctly a stage play, and they were
Right.
going to film it in performance. But the show had closed, so we would have we were going to restage it for them and get an audience in, and
Right.
they at the last minute, nobody had done that before, and they just lost their nerve on it and decided that they would have to do it soap, meaning that you do it in scenes and you have 2 to 3 cameras
Yeah.
that are not very mobile,
Right.
and everything is being filmed at eye level, and so at that point it becomes like 1950s drama.
I was going to say, like, live TV.
Yeah,
Like,
like live TV.
Yeah.
And almost is like live TV. I mean, they're taping it, so if you really screw up, you can go back and retape it, but it still has that look.
Kind of like
And-
Barnabas Collins or like the old
yeah.
BBC type of
Yeah.
stuff.
Oh God, love me. Some
And
George
except
Adams.
not
No,
that
I-
good, because the people who do those things become very expert. They go on week after week after week after week, and they get very expert at doing that. And this was, it just didn't work. It just didn't work. Plus, the guy we had playing Dr. Van Helsing was, we had 2 of them. One was old enough and one was, but he wasn't available. The first guy, though, the guy who originated it, was wonderful, but he was a young man playing an older guy, which you could do on the stage, and they decided you couldn't do that. And so they got somebody, I forget whether he had been on Get Smart or something. He had some credit, but he wasn't any good. He just didn't have he was one of those bland TV actors.
Oh.
TV acting can eventually get to be where everything, and it's much less so, not anymore.
Right.
But live TV, one of the things that happened, unless people were very good, is that it was the pause, that there would be a pause, and they weren't active, they were reactive. So that you would
it's a
say
dramatic
something and somebody
pause?
would, instead of you saying, I hate you. Well, I hate you too. People would say, I hate you. Well, I hate you too.
Right.
And everything would calm down. And the pause was a saving grace, because you were so under rehearsed.
The
And
British were
especially in
really good
soap
with
opera.
this.
And it was just a style that evolved, and it was crappy. And it didn't work at all in a play that was supposed to be snapping, moving along. So I don't show it to people. So it's.
How was the play itself though? Like I'm
I was
talking
gonna
about
ask you,
not the HBO, but I'm talking about the actual.
Oh, the
play.
play was a hit. The play was a hit. It was as if we wanted it to be kind of tongue in cheek, but we didn't want it to be campy, and we wanted it to be a little bit scary at times. And we wrote it as if Oscar Wilde or Bernard Shaw had done an adaptation of Dracula. That was the idea.
Interesting.
And yeah, there's ours in the middle, the red one. There's
that one right here.
Click on that. That was our Dracula, and Christopher Bonneau. And now there have been a lot of other productions, and most of them have not worked because it was a unique cast. It was just a great cast. And
He looks like Bill Bixby a little bit.
And Chris Bonneau, he was a soap star, and quite popular. And the other stuff, other productions, I think very few of them have worked. But we did. We had this remarkable cast who could do it almost as if it was.
Played straight, I'm assuming.
They played it straight, but it's like good actors with a good sense of comedy playing it straight.
Right.
And so the timing was superb, but nobody was trying to get a laugh.
Right.
And we also had this wonderful. We had a couple of wonderful special effects, and they cost, a number of them cost $1.380 because we had no money. It was terribly under budgeted, but we had Dracula changed into a bat on stage, and it was very much like an old style, a magic show in some extent. We stole some ideas from. There used to be guys.
I heard a little bit about this. Like you guys tried to wand up bat at first, like the.
Oh yeah. It was like no. Well, we would this all evolved from a production we did at a regional theater, and it was a terrible script, and I cut it and reshaped it a little bit. And this theater had no money, just like a lot of stuff I've done. And it was in the round. It was in 3/4 round. It wasn't there was the stage, the back of the stage could have a set, but the audience sat on 3 sides. And so certain things like a bat flying through and Dracula changing to a bat, we were trying to figure out how to do that. And we tried, one thing was like this we tried a bat, one of those Japanese toys that you wound up and the wings flapped, and we sprayed it black. And we tried to float it down a string, and it just went around the string like that and fell at my feet. And there was this guy in the cast playing the butler, who was a very, I won't get into his. He was a bit of a reprobate and a bit of a shyster, and delightfully so, but. My stage manager had persuaded me to hire him to play the butler, because she said, "You've got to hire him." And I said, "Why?" She said, he ended up on my couch. He's been there for 3 weeks, and if he has a job, I can kick him out. And David Richmond, and he was for years, and he kind of cleaned up his act eventually, but had a lovely life. But he at that time he was God's own drunk, and but he kept coming up and saying, "I think I know how to do a bat," and I would say, "Yeah, fine, just learn your lines." And so when this thing finally fell at my feet and was flopping around there, he said, "I know how to do a bat." And I said, "Okay, come on, let's go backstage and talk about it." And he said, "Okay, I'll admit it. I don't know how to do a bat, but I know how to do a floating, glowing handkerchief." And he had toured with a guy named Dr. Silkini, the Ghost Master, he was a guy who in the 50s, late 40s and 50s, he would tour all over the tank towns, all over any place, and do four-wall a movie theater and bring in a pirated editions of Dracula and Frankenstein, show those, and then do a spook show afterwards. And the idea of a spook show was glowing things that they would turn out the lights, and you got to cuddle your date in the night.
Yeah.
While supposedly she screamed as
The original
floating
date movies.
floating
It's okay, baby.
floating
Nobody's
things.
gonna get you. I got
And
you.
the glowing handkerchiefs were done with spook poles, and kids that would be hired on the spot to come in and shake these spook poles. And then there were other kids that would be hired for these, always for nothing, who held paddles up above the exit signs so that it would be a complete blackout and you couldn't see the guys with the spook poles. So eventually, and I said, yeah, that can do it. I just have to build an origami screen wire bat. And it was the greatest special effect you ever saw. Dracula slowly was talking to him, and he went up and he would slowly spread his cape, and the lights would be going down. And just at the very last minute, he would go like this, and there would be just for this long strobe light, so that you saw the cape go boom, 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 and then there was a huge flash behind him. And then all of a sudden, there was this glowing bat there. And if you did it just right, the audience never knew they were in a blackout. And there was this glowing bat. It looked for all the world like it changed into a bat, and it was sort of see-through because of the screen wire. And so people would always scream, and then they'd applaud, and then it would start to move. And then it would come out and buzz the first rows of the audience.
So cool.
And it was just this kid on a pole. You always hoped, please don't turn up the lights, because here's this kid with a pole shaking it over the audience, but it would sail out over the audience. And that was the
That is
making
fantastic.
Oh, that's beautiful.
of the show. The reviewer for the New York Times, the producers of the theater managed to get him to come out. He thought this was so great. And we had a bunch of other special effects that were pretty good too. And,
Did you get that guy a bottle of hooch for it? For the idea?
We he ended up being my co-author, and we wrote the play together.
Get out of
Because-
here. That's awesome.
Because the guy who ran the regional theater, Eric Krebs, who's still with us, David is no longer with us, but he decided this can be a hit if we just had a script to go with it. So he said, "You guys write a script," and he said, "I'll
Holy
give you
shit.
some money. I will underwrite you writing the script." So we wrote the script, and we worked on it, and it turned out to be pretty damn good. It's
Well, that's
published now.
one thing I want to ask you too, because when I Googled it, like I'm looking at, is this play still going on? Like,
Oh, well, what it is they get published, and there's a publishing company named Samuel French that's the big play publisher, and so people can buy the script, and if they like it, they can do the production. And you get a little bit of royalties off it, and it was done in London.
so this
in
had to
fact,
be more than a decent. I think you're underplaying this play a little bit.
I think so too.
I'm
Now,
saying, because I'm looking at all these posters, and
What-
all of them have your name on it. So
Yeah,
this
well, you don't get. Well, I'll tell you the truth. I finally, there. Go on. Wait a minute. Go back up. Go click in on that one. That logo, the Passion of Dracula. No, go down that one. That one I did.
yeah,
That's me. My logo.
oh, that's
you
beautiful.
drew that, right?
Yeah,
Like you
yeah.
drew
Oh, that's badass.
And
you wouldn't happen to have the original artwork lying around somewhere?
no,
Maybe send it to me. And
long ago. I don't know who wrote that.
Had you ever thought of doing a comic book adaptation of this?
It wouldn't work as a comic book.
Gotcha. Got you.
But I don't get the royalties from it. My ex-wife gets the royalties. I gave her the royalties when we split up.
I got to tell you, that was one of the toughest things I had to accept when I got a divorce, was that all my intellectual properties were split in half with
Seriously?
with the ex-wife. I never
Well,
learned that until after we were divorced, and then I had to sue somebody because they stole one of them. You know,
Oh man,
the
Proud Bachelor.
well, mine was weird. We were on good terms. It was just time, and I had nothing to give her. I didn't have any money, so it was one of the things that I could do at the time was just. She always loved the play. She was very involved in the production, and so I let her, because the money was in thirds. It was me, Eric Krebs, the producer, got a cut, and the other author got a cut. So Lorraine gets a cut when the stuff comes through. And we were both broke at the time. I actually had to go back. It was so odd. This is going to sound weird, but I had to go back to court in order to give her alimony, to request to be able to give her alimony.
Oh my God.
Because
Are you a saint or what?
No. What was crazy? I
can
got.
you just give her a check? Like, just
This
hey,
was
here's
the
alimony.
90s. This was the 90s. No, I wanted to be able to write it off. There
Oh, okay, I see what
was a
you're saying.
Good reason.
You can
why
write that
I did
off.
I did it that way. Oh yeah, and I checked with my accountant, and he said, no, you have to be able to, because we had run up this credit card bill together.
Yeah.
There was nothing I could do, and we split up. And then a year later, the 90s have kicked in. I'm working for Valiant, and I'm getting 90s money.
Bob, it looks like you got a new fan. I'm just saying.
And it was just
Breaking some hearts over
impossible
here.
not to try to share that with her some way, because she deserved it. But it was it was weird.
Jesus, you do have a heart of gold. Like, I wouldn't have never did that. But then again, I have to say, like, me and my ex did not have a amicable divorce, I guess you could say. It was very bitter. It's amazing to me. Like, they do have customers out there. I mean, couples out there that do have the ability to do that.
Yeah, the divorces aren't always nasty. They're amicable sometimes.
It was hard. It was, I think, the hardest thing I've ever done. But I couldn't be in New York anymore. She could only be in New York. She became an inveterate New Yorker. She's from a little town in northern Nebraska, and she thrived in New York. And basically, I was a failure. I could not get anything going in New York. And it wasn't until the 90s that I really felt that I had been successful at anything. And,
even after all those comics that you did when you lived in New York, like, you still.
Oh man, the money was so bad.
Yeah.
That
you guys didn't realize back then that you were building history, though, right?
I think somehow I'm sounding pathetic, but I was slow. I was
not. No. I don't think you sounded pathetic at all. I think you at the time period, like Jack Kirby said at that time, like, and everybody laughed at him. He was like, one day our work is going to be in galleries, and people were like, yeah, Jack, whatever, you fucking lunatic. You know what I'm saying?
It's like when you go to a horror convention and you meet these people that, were in your favorite horror movies, and they're kind of shocked. They're like, when we were making this stuff, we didn't think that, like,
it's like Doctor Who.
Watching it like 40, 50, 60 years later.
Doctor Who, Star Trek, all those people thought they were just spinning their wheels and just wasting time. And
but that's one of the beauties of art.
I remember going to a Hammer convention very early on. About the time we were writing this thing, I thought, well, I should see what's going on. And I think Peter Cushing was there. And Ingrid Pitt. And they people were crazy that Ingrid Pitt was there, and they come up and give her flowers. And I think at the podium, she was, all these people were giving her flowers, and she started to cry. She said there's just nothing. She didn't know what was happening. It was like, this was like.
Well, Drew Struzan was like that too. Drew Struzan had no idea he had a fan following. Drew Struzan, the guy who did all the movie posters for Star Wars, and
I have his book. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I got it too. But he was like, they were like, Drew, why don't you do a convention? He was like, nobody wants to see me at a convention. He
Yeah.
does a convention and he freaked out because the line was around the building,
Yeah.
like to meet Drew Struzan. And he was
I
like,
think
this is
Basil
crazy.
Gogos had a similar experience.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And like,
I stood in line to meet Basil Goggles. Of course, that had been my hero, and it was like only just before he died, that
Yeah.
I finally got to meet him.
but Bob, I honestly think you
Beautiful.
fall in that category. You know what I'm saying? I think all the work that you did, that you toiled away on back in before the 90s. And to be honest, like I love that work. Like that work
Oh,
is, you know,
I'm having a great time now. It's the problem was that, and this is just part and parcel of the career. I just was I got much faster once I was doing Shadow Man. And I don't
yeah.
know why. I think it might have been that the author was satisfied with the artist's work, and I had a confidence that I'd never had before. That the author being me. So, but I had a couple of experiences at Marvel that I didn't finish the Squadron Supreme series.
Yeah.
I did. What was how many? I can't remember how many I did, but I stopped at the point where they were really adding a ton of characters, and I had to say, I just can't. I can't do this in a month. I'm not that artist. I can't do it. And
So
maintain the quality
you never,
that
you
I
never
had.
made it all the way to issue 12 of Squadron on,
No.
I think around
I
7 or
realized
8,
that.
I remember reading.
Who?
I think 7 or 8, I think, is
Yeah,
the
yeah,
issue where.
yeah.
Some
Yep.
artists aren't team play, like team book guys. You know what I'm saying? Like some artists are just more comfortable like
I think
with
I
one
think
or
I,
two
I
characters.
often was offered team stuff because I'd been trained by Buscema.
Yeah. So you
And
were typecast a
Buscema
little
was
bit.
one of the ultimate team guys, and I just was so slow.
Yeah.
And
Well, Todd McFarlane said the same thing. Like he's not a team. He doesn't like team books. He'd rather
yeah,
just do. And so did Eric Larson. All those guys. Like
that's why I ended up picking another reason why I ended up picking Shadow Man. It was not a team book,
yeah.
and uh, my swan song at Marvel was another. I think I just got a reputation as somebody that couldn't necessarily finish something, and my last job there really was I had a couple of afterwards, but I was doing a Nick Fury series, and I'd been asked to. They asked me if I could do it, and I had some other commitment. I don't remember what it was, and I said I can work it in, but I'll have to have the script waiting for me when I turn in the first issue. I'll have to be able to start the next one. And if I can't do it that way, I'll never make the deadlines until I finish the other, because I got another project that I have to finish.
Yeah.
And at the end of the first issue, I said, script is ready. He said, no, it'll be ready in a couple of days. And the editor, and then it wasn't ready, and it wasn't ready, and it wasn't ready. And it got to the point I said, I can't do it. You're going to have to find somebody who's faster than me now, because you're going to need this not in 4 weeks. You're going to need it in a week and a half.
Well,
And
from what I
can't do
heard,
it.
like Marvel and DC were notorious for that too, right? Like you would, like everybody went in expecting to have 30 days to knock out a book, but really, in reality, you had, if you were lucky, you had 3 weeks.
Well,
Yeah.
you 3 weeks was about right. 3 weeks
Yeah.
was about right, because you got to remember that you're feeding it, but you were hoping that what you could do is take longer and feed it to somebody, so that the inker was working on it. You didn't have 4 weeks to pencil it, and you really needed to be done with it after about 3 weeks so that they could get it going. But the problem was, I think it was sort of the last straw for me at Marvel. I think Bob Harris was the writer.
Yeah.
I have a funny feeling that they never told Bob this, and the editor never did it. But he then became the editor at Marvel, and I think I haven't talked to Bob about it. I've never seen Bob since then, but I don't know why he would remember it, but I just have this feeling that was the sense that I just got no more work for Marvel after that, really. So that was when I went to Valiant. So I'm glad. It really worked out okay. And once I was writing my own stuff, it was fine.
Well, there
great.
was there was certain books that stood out to me at Valiant Comics, and one of them was Shadow Man, and the other one was Exo Man of War, and
I loved it. Excellent.
the other ones I really never really got into. Exo stood out to me because it was kind of an original character, and they also had Barry Windsor Smith working on it, right?
Oh,
And
Well,
great stuff.
they had Barry was that, and then of course Barry's first love was Archer and Armstrong
yeah,
that he was writing as well, and I liked that one too. I thought it had a
I
nice.
could never get into that one.
Different.
Yeah,
It was different, and it was never quite the same. Nobody else could really draw
No,
Armstrong.
not like
he was-
Barry.
he- I
Fallen
think-
Barry is a fucking pain in the ass. I'll tell you that. Right?
I think to some extent Armstrong was a piece of Barry.
Yeah,
You know, Barry was not that. I don't know what he looks like now, but he was not that stocky. But he had the feel to. I loved. There was a character named Master Dark in Shadow Man, and we had to design Master Dark, and I was not living in New York at the time, but I came to New York and got to work with Barry on that design, and it was delightful.
well,
just
Master
had the
Dark was
best
also
time.
the first Valiant supervillain too, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it was when I was first talking to Barry, he said, "Well, I think they're saying that it ought to be kind of like a Jack Kirby kind of character," and I said, "Nah, we want to make him." I said, "I want him to look like Aubrey Beardsley, who was an artist
Yeah.
from the," and I knew that Barry would know exactly what that looked like, and so we did this almost albino, very aesthetic, lean villain, which I thought was unique to and
I thought he was unique to Shadow Man. Like I thought he was
and
perfect villain for Shadow Man. Yeah,
and Barry immediately picked up on it and just did this brilliant design in about a day. And being able to watch Barry go in and do this in his blue pencil and then his pen was just to die for.
it was a phenomenal character creation, like the tattoos and all that kind of stuff. It was
And
great.
if for those of us who aren't familiar with Aubrey Beardsley, there's a little work of his the stuff he did for La Morte d'Arthur.
Mm-hmm. And you can see it. You can see a little bit of Beardsley in some of Barry's work, I think.
Yeah, I'm a very, very big fan of Beardsley.
Now, your first, like when you were thinking about getting back into comics, right? When you was thinking about making a career out of comics, one of the first books that somebody showed to you was Barry Windsor Smith, right? Like his Conan.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
There's a friend of mine in. I'm sorry, the cat is just on another computer over there. And
That's okay.
I think he's just yes, he has just turned my wife's computer on. I was going to go to New York to be a theater director, and during all of this, I maintained a career as a theater director, and I realized that unless you were independently wealthy, that you needed to have a day job, and that the day jobs were death to trying to be in the arts in New York, because you would just the cost of living there, you would find yourself struggling, and people would go and they would want to do something else, but slowly the day job would take over and become their primary job.
Let me correct you on that just a little bit. Like day jobs are death to any creative.
Yeah.
Because I'll be honest, when I was doing my day job, like I was like, oh, this is great. I get paid a lot of money during the day. Then I can come home and do whatever I want. But that by the time I got home, I was so blown out. I was like, there's just no way, And when I tried, it was very substandard work,
So I decided I had to find a marketable skill, and I was trying to think, well, what can I do? Well, I'd become a fair artist put myself through school doing posters for the theater department and for the student union and some stuff like that. They were really, my lettering was really substandard. It was before you could, before that's the other good thing about digital is you can drop in lettering. Thank God, I'm terrible at
Oh man.
but
Yeah, I can say that for a fact.
but I was a friend of mine who was an actor, who was a comic book fan, and I said, well, why don't you think about drawing comic books? And I remembered comics from when I was a kid, that stack of comics that I got in the hospital, and some of them were really good, well drawn, and most of them were pretty bad. Back in the early 50s, there was a lot of really bad art back in the early 50s, some of which is treasured now because it's, but it was kind of primitive looking. And I thought, well, I can be primitive. I can be a bad artist. I can do that. And
little did you know.
So he showed me. So he started showing me some stuff, and the stuff I saw were. I'm sorry. Hang on a second. I'll be right back. This has to be dealt with. I'm sorry.
That's okay. We're very forgiving when it comes to
got the computer in permanent.
If you'd like to give your feline friends some screen time, feel free. We're always interested in.
We're gonna hear a cat dying
fellow
in a second.
creators, cats, and dogs. How's your pooch doing, Preston?
I don't know what he may have written, but I want to try to read it later. So he showed me stuff, and what he showed me was like disheartening. It was like Barry Smith's Conan, and not the early Barry Smith. It was just in that period where Barry was really starting to look fucking tastic.
Yeah.
And so I saw and some of the Warren stuff, which was all just amazingly good. Yeah. And then Neil Adams was doing Green Lantern, Green Arrow, and the Avengers. He had finished the run on the X-Men, but he was just starting to do the Avengers. Kirby was over, who I knew from when I was a kid. I recognized that's the same guy, and he was doing the New Gods, and Buscema was in doing everything at Marvel, and Bernie Wrightson was doing all the it was just, and Joe Kubert was just about to start doing Tarzan,
and it was the greatest comic you looked at this ever.
No,
you looked at this stuff and said, and Gene Colan was doing Daredevil, and you looked at this stuff and said, I can't do that, but I really want to.
Yeah, but you did. That's the thing.
I'm going to learn how to do that, because it combined everything that I loved, which was drawing, in a way, theater. You staged everything. It was like doing storyboards, so it just literature. It was a combination of everything that I liked, and I thought I really, really want to learn to do that. And and I was very proud of the fact that it took me. Let's say I went to New York in 1991. By that, I would say from about 1990 through 1974. It took me about 4 years before I could get work. Now, it was easier to get work then because it was an earn while you learn business. And the idea was that when you started, you were doing almost an apprenticeship kind of thing. Now, obviously, you can't do that anymore. You can do it in independent comics, but not in Marvel or DC. You have to be trained. And nobody was...
I remember hearing that Neil Adams was offered any book he wanted, and he chose the X-Men specifically because he wanted a place where he could sort of develop his style, develop his work, where he didn't have a spotlight on him. So he decided to work on one of the smaller books, so there were fewer eyes on him.
Yeah, and it may have been just that Neil. I would suspect that Neil felt that Neil had confidence that if he did a book, it would sell. Now, in fact, that wasn't always true. The X-Men didn't really sell, although I think they were beautiful. They were gorgeous. And really, Green Lantern, Green Arrow never really, really sold the way it deserved to.
Yeah.
But I think he may have. I would never pretend to understand Neil's mind. I don't mean that badly. He's just a unique mind, but
Right.
but he may well have wanted a chance to see how he did with incorporating the Marvel style. Um, how is that different than a DC style, and can he
Transition.
do that? And he did do some experimentation. He had some really Marvel. Tom Palmer was clearly the inker for him at Marvel, but he, I think, as I recall, he requested Joe Sinnott when he did a couple
Should
of
have been
Thors,
Joe.
Well,
and
a lot
and
of people
and
want
and
to.
John Forporten on the Inhumans. Don't forget, he did the Inhumans for a while, so he
Yeah,
was
Yeah, man.
interested in, I think, doing stuff that would show him off as the Neil stylist, as opposed to maybe some of the stuff where he would have had to have
a lot of those
stayed
image
in line.
guys want to point to Kirby when they say like we learned our technique and all this stuff from Kirby. But I got to be honest, if you look at some of Neil Adams' early work, he was so innovative when he came to panel layouts. As far as like breaking that non by non panel layout, 6x6 panel layout, he was doing stuff that was really innovative.
Yeah,
Where
and
he
his
would do
storytelling was fantastic.
yeah, he would break the border. He would do all kinds of crazy shit. And
There's one in Dead Man. See, Dead Man was where he really went to town with that.
I got
Yeah,
those,
man.
by the way.
Oh, those are awesome. Those are
And
so good.
and you've seen the one that has smoke coming up out of some pit, and you if you look at it this way, it'll say, "Hey, look at Jim Steranko effect." And so he was really trying to incorporate, I think, a lot of people. I'm looking for something. Excuse me. I'm just looking behind me to see if I can't. I'm
So good.
forgetting a name. Let's see if I can find it here. Yeah. Do you know Stan Drake's stuff?
I'm not familiar,
A
but
little bit.
what we got?
Stan Drake and Leonard Starr. You should look them up.
Okay.
They are. Stan Drake did a book called "The Heart of Juliet Jones." It was a. I guess, man, I'm just going to see if I can find something here. It was a soap opera strip that ran in the 50s. And if you want to kind of get an impression of where Neil learned some of his stuff when he was first going into it.
Oh, that's interesting.
Oh, nice. Holy shit.
And so what Neil did was incorporate Stan Drake and Jack Kirby and Steranko, and he was trying to meld those things. But it's worth taking a look. Stan Drake was also a big influence on Bill Sienkiewicz. In fact, this character, if you look at the early Moon Knights, is Moon Knight's girlfriend.
Oh, no kidding.
That's
so
that's
cool.
crazy. Yeah, that does look like Neil's work. Like Neil's, like the way Neil does his
And
women.
it's not like Neil's copy. That was just, and Neil was very Stan Drake like when he did his first newspaper strip, the Ben Casey strip.
Yeah.
No, he did the that was the TV series Dr. Ben Casey, and there was a newspaper strip of it, and that was Neil's newspaper strip, and it was beautiful.
I had no
Gorgeous.
idea that there was a Ben Casey strip, and I especially had no idea that there was a Ben Casey strip by Neil Adams. Wow.
Oh yeah, you got to look it up. It's
That's so
well.
Cool.
I don't know if Neil's in here. Let me see. This is a book that I just pulled up. It's the closest I have right here. This is the Cartoonist Cookbook, and each of these is somebody's bad idea. Each of these cartoonists was supposed to give their favorite recipe. I know. Oh God!
Don't pull out the anarchist cookbook on mistake. That would be bad.
And of course, I don't think any of them ever cooked in their lives. But no, I can't find it. Neil is somewhere in here, but anyway.
But
But it's definitely worth looking up the Stan Drake, and you can buy collected works of Juliet Jones, and they are lessons in how to draw anything that's home based, houses, interiors.
You
And
see,
make
that's
them.
that's another thing too. That's what a lot of artists dread is doing backgrounds. I'm on the opposite of that. Like I love doing backgrounds. I think it's great. How do you feel about like where did you get your backgrounds from, or because I like I heard you
Well,
say
see,
before.
I did a lot of scenery design.
Oh, for theater.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Excellent. Because I heard you say before, like reference material was like really scarce back then.
Oh, it's fun. Here's Neil's recipe. The
Oh wait,
this
I'll
is
put you on full screen.
very young Neil Adams doing.
Let's see that young picture of Neil Adams again, because he looked like a greaser back then, didn't he? Like
he's got the Superman cowlick.
And but you can see here's Neil.
Right.
And you can see the Stan Drake influence, but there's Ben Casey at the bottom using his scalpel to create a salad.
Nice.
You know, when
That's
you mentioned Stan Drake, I was the Heart of Juliet Jones. That's not what I knew him from, and I just like looked him up. It's like Kelly Green. That's what I know him from.
Kelly Green later in his career, after they stopped having realistic comic strip realism.
That damn cat.
That's the cat again. Oh God! You can come over here and join this. You don't have to sit there and knock things off the table.
We like seeing people's kitties.
But they stopped having those kind of strips because when they reduced the size of newspaper strips, the art just didn't show up in them of this kind caliber, and. Right. Stan Drake started doing Dagwood. He did Dagwood and Blondie.
Oh, no kidding! Yeah, that's funny. I had no idea.
So now we're seeing my stuff. There we go.
I just want to make people aware. Like these are the type of commissions that you're offering on your on the website where people can go, to commission you to do art.
Yeah, and it's you go to catskillcomics.com, and you get is that me? Yeah, that is.
These are all you. This is everything.
That is me.
Yeah.
I don't remember doing that one, but I signed it, so it must be me.
Look at the perspective on that. That's fucking gorgeous.
That's fantastic.
Right there. Yeah, with the billboard in the background, and yeah, these are awesome. Like these are pretty fucking fantastic. I really like them, especially this one.
I love this one. This was an oddity.
Oh,
this guy just wanted a picture of this old movie house in town with all these characters.
And there's a Ghost Rider movie playing in the back.
Yeah, there's the Red Skull, Doctor Doom, the Lizard.
Oh, I love the supervillain team up when I was a kid.
Oh my God, these are phenomenal. Like
I got where I've loved doing grayscale too every once in a while.
I like doing grayscale too. I think it's fun.
I love black and white art. I wanted to do my comics, Six Gun Gorilla. I wanted to do that in black and white, but black and white's just a much harder sell.
And this is Dark right there from Shadow Man, and that's the character we were talking about earlier.
I think one of the hardest things to do for me is always I've got one now that wants to be Kraven the Hunter and Spider-Man, and that in a good fight, you very often can't see both characters from the front, but most people who want commissions want to see both of them. They're fighting. Yeah, but you want to see both of them, so that's always my nemesis.
Oh wow, I never thought about
how can I do that?
One thing that always put me off about doing a comic that takes place in New Orleans, and is because I didn't want to draw the wrought iron, like that wrought iron
cemetery scene. Can you imagine?
No, look at what he did right here. You see all this wrought iron?
It's amazing.
This work that he did
Yeah.
I mean,
lattice work.
What are we looking at? Hours on just the fencing and
it's beautiful.
Yeah, like nice that detail. Is some serious shit, dude.
Yeah, the problem with it is not that the first one of them. It's like the boredom that sets in about
exactly.
Halfway.
Yeah. Yeah, that is crazy. But yeah, mad respect anybody who wants to do a comic set in New Orleans. But yours, like Shadow Man, that's one of the one things that I was like, God, like I felt like
What
less
are
of a man. I'll be honest with you, Bob. Like you made me feel like less of a
what did
man.
you what did you pick? What did you pick? Where did you pick these up from? Is this my website
These are
or?
ones that have already sold on your here, let me pull it up. These are past commissions by Bob Hall. Um
So is this
they're
on?
in
This
your
is on my on Catskills, right?
yeah, this is on your commission gallery in
Right,
Catskill.
right. So this is Catskill Comics, and he just has all the commissions I've done, and
Ooh.
Yeah.
Is that a
oh, I am.
Christopher Lee Dracula over there?
Yeah, let
Yeah,
me
yeah.
pull it up.
Oh, hell yeah.
Superman and Wonder Woman. That's your coloring technique is pretty badass too. Do you use watercolors or is it gouache or acrylics?
And I'm not sure with this one. It's not gouache, although I will use gouache if I screw it up. But it's it's a little bit of watercolor, a little bit of pencil,
Yeah.
and a bunch of certain kind of markers. I forget who makes them, Pentel or somebody
Huh.
that makes a marker that I really like. I finally found one that I really like. I know everybody loves those
Copics. I'm not big on copics.
topics. I hate
Yeah.
them. I can't work with them. They're
From what I
I don't know
understand,
what it
there's
is.
acid inside of the Copic ink. So eventually it's going to break down the paper. Like they were never really made to do like commission art. They were always made for doing production line art for like,
Yeah.
like cells and stuff like that. And there was, oh, it never came up. All right, hold on. Let's see. The Dracula. Where's that one
Yeah,
at?
there's a Christopher Lee. There should be a Christopher Lee in there somewhere.
There it is, right
Oh,
here.
man. I almost met him. Almost met him.
Yeah. Yeah, that one's better.
Nice. Actually, there's a Mego action figure of the Christopher Lee Dracula that's coming out. That should be on its way to me soon.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, like you got some pretty phenomenal stuff. The Thors, I really like the Thors. The Thors are awesome. Um, and yeah, like I'm not gonna show people the ones that are for sale because I got my eye on one of them.
Okay.
And
Start a bidding war.
I don't need anybody coming out there trying to gank my piece. That's phenomenal too. I love the lighting on this one. And the way you mix the colors, like it's not just white, like you got like colors that from the surrounding area and stuff like that inside the mask. I really dig that. And this one, the shadows on it are crazy. Like fitting for
Cool.
a character named Shadow Man. Yeah.
That's why it's called Shadow Man. Yeah. I got to go pretty soon, guys.
No, I figured you would. That's
I was
why I
gonna
want to
say,
go
I'm
over
gonna
this
have-
real quick.
I'm gonna have to.
I
cut out
really
myself.
liked it. I really liked that one. I got to pull that off and make sure it's on my website. I totally forgotten that I'd done that one. Every once in a while, I look at these. Some of these are pretty good. Hey,
Who did that?
Made in Hell in the chat asks, "Where do you get those, Brian?" Okay, we
Everything
get those.
is in the in the description. All of Bob's links from his website to his to Catskill Comics, where you can go ahead and select his name and go ahead and select your commission. Or
and if you,
go ahead.
I was
Bob.
going to say, and if you find me on Facebook or Instagram, I'm posting now. I didn't post a lot of the commissions I was doing when I was doing this science project because it was every week I had something had to go up, and that's ended now. And so I'm posting a bunch of the commissions that I've done in the last several months, a few each week. And so tomorrow I'm posting two things: portraits of people as superheroes, which is something that I'll get a request for, and also just some straight portraits because I also do straight portraiture. So take a look, and I'm also on Facebook. You can find me at Bob Hall, and I'll probably friend you. But I also have a fan page, Bob Hall Comic Artist.
Now, for the women in the chat, Bob, are you still married?
Yeah.
Ah, Sorry, ladies.
All right, we're gonna head out because Bob's got shit to do. I got shit to do. Brian, he doesn't have.
Yeah, I
shit
got to
to
go
do,
pick
but he's
up
still
all
gonna
that
go
stuff.
do shit.
I'm writing a comic for you. What do you mean I don't have shit to do?
But
all that stuff that the cat just dropped on the floor has got to go. We got to be picked up.
yeah. Now,
And I
Bob,
got to read whatever she wrote.
hang
but,
around for a
hey,
minute
guys,
after the show's over, and we'll
hey,
talk
guys,
a little bit.
this was a lot of fun. Bring me back sometime. I'd love to do this again.
Anytime you want to
Thank
come
you
back.
so much, sir.
Yeah, we'll do a panel
Yeah.
one day where you're not on, you're not spotlighted, and we'll just get a bunch of creators in here and just talk shop.
I won't.
you know?
I won't do that. It's either me or
It's either me or nothing.
He's not
See
sharing
you
the
guys later.
spotlight with
Y'all take it
nobody.
easy, and check out Bob's